Welcome back, everybody. I'm Melissa Rayberger. There's a lot more today on the Foley fallout over those sexually charged emails the former congressman was sending to teenage boys. The latest this afternoon, I want to read it to you, is the Justice Department has sent a letter to the House Counsel asking that Congressman Foley's office computer and documents in his office be protected to preserve any potential evidence that might be there. We are told such preservation letters are common in computer crime investigations, so it looks like the investigations will now begin. The Mark Foley email scandal that we have been talking about, how much will it hurt Republicans in the coming midterm elections as well? Here to talk about it are MSNBC political analysts Pat Buchanan and Mike Papantonio from Air America Radio. Good afternoon to both of you.
Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Pat, let's start with you because a new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows Republicans with only an 18% favorable rating, while 41% view them as unfavorable. Is this the last straw as they try to hold on to critical seats in both the House and the Senate next month?
Well, this is going to be very bad for Republicans because Republicans do have basically different standards of morality than many Democrats do. And something like this disgusts and outrages them. And it particularly disgusts and outrages their conservative, socially conservative, and Christian evangelical base. And those people don't need any more disheartening. So I think it's all downhill on this issue. The question is how much damage is done. That's the only question.
Mike, what do you think? Do you think this will give Democrats ammunition in the next 5 weeks?
Yeah, I think the only thing the Republicans have left, Melissa, is the issue on terrorism. This takes them away from that argument. Going into November, they lose on all the poll numbers. They lose on the economy, on the war in Iraq. They now lose on honesty and believability. They lose on health care. You have 60% of the American public that are unhappy about the direction that this country's gone. Now, to have to take this focus away from terrorism and talk about this Republican predator, this Republican pedophile, this Republican conspiracy to cover up this Republican pedophile is a big problem for the Republicans.
Pat, do you agree? I mean, do you see this as an embarrassment across the board for the GOP? Do you see it as a black eye?
Well, look, what this is going to do, certainly for Republicans it is, but let me disagree with Mike. I'll tell you, this is going to boomerang on the Democrats for the simple reason of this. You know, the consensual age for sex in Washington, D.C. is 16 years old, which means if this congressman had gone off to a motel with this kid, there'd have been no crime committed, although conservatives would be outraged. One of the reasons the age of consent has been reduced is the gay rights movement, which is wholly basically inside the Democratic Party.
Pat, it's Melissa. I'm sorry, I have to jump in right now because we have some breaking news on Capitol Hill. I believe that we're going to go to Mike Vicara. Angie, is that right? All right, Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right, go ahead. Apparently you have some breaking news to share with us.
Well, the first casualty of this Foley scandal on the House side turns out to be a top staffer to Representative Tom Reynolds. He, of course, is the chair of the Republican Campaign Committee trying to get Republicans reelected come November 7th. His top aide, a man named Kirk Fordham. Now, this gentleman has been at the center of a lot of this speculation sort of behind the scenes. He is a former chief of staff to Mark Foley. He went to work for Tom Reynolds, but has interfered apparently in this story in this sense. He went to Foley. ABC News came to him. He learned that ABC News, which broke this story on Thursday of last week, was about to publish some of these emails. He went to ABC News and he tried to get them to squash the story. Democrats have cried foul that this is all for political purposes. They cite more evidence here. Tom Reynolds is on the griddle now, as we've reported earlier. He's in the middle of all this. He says he told Hastert about it way back in the spring. Hastert says he doesn't remember talking about it. Reynolds himself now in trouble in his Buffalo area district. His top aide now, Kirk Fordham, resigning from his seat at the National Republican Campaign Committee, Melissa.
So, Mike, let's just for everybody to be perfectly clear,
right.
What we have here now is not what we've been talking about as far as this. It seems like almost the telephone game going through Capitol Hill that, oh, I told so-and-so and they told so-and-so and they told so-and-so. This is actually somebody trying to interfere with this coming out. Is that correct?
That is the story we are getting.
Mike Vicara, will you stand by for us? I'd appreciate it if you would, because we also want to bring in our panel. Pat Buchanan, MSNBC political analyst, also Mike Papantonio from Air America Radio have been talking with us. Pat, let's start with you. What do you make of this? Are you surprised to hear it?
Not terribly, but it's very bad news for Republicans because now there's blood in the water. and now there's another story for tomorrow, and this is a continuing story. For these scandals to grow, they've got to continue. You need fresh blood, and they've certainly got it today. And this is going to raise new questions about interfering with the press, cover up, and so this is going to continue. It is all bad news for the Republicans, Melissa. There's no way to sugarcoat it.
Mike, what do you think?
Melissa,
go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
if I were an aide working, if I were an aide working for Hastert, if I were an aide working for any of these people involved, I would lawyer up right now. I got to tell you, I used to be a prosecutor. People go to prison for a lot less than this. Use of the phone, use of the internet across the state lines. Listen, people that aren't considering the conspiracy issue, the aiding and abetting issue, are really naive here. If there are aides out here and they participated in this, they need to go see a lawyer. This is much more serious than they may be thinking. I got to tell you, every day people go to prison for much less than this. And there's going to be a lot of Republican aides going to prison.
You know, Pat, at this point, actually to both of you at this point, I mean, Congressman Foley's emails came out, and they're certainly very embarrassing to him and a lot of other people as well. But the question is still out there as to whether a crime was committed.
Exactly.
Now, this situation looks very different, though, doesn't it?
Well, it's still, but I mean, what I'm getting is that somebody tried to get the press not to run a story. That happens all the time. I don't see, I'll be honest, the crime that is committed. If Foley has an affair with this kid in Washington, D.C., it's not a crime. Why then is it a crime to send lewd and lascivious messages to it?
Because you can't use a phone, you can't use the internet
for what?
to
What's the
engage
crime?
in pedophile activity.
He's not a pedophile. The kid is a teenager.
Pat, you have prosecutors right here in Pensacola that if they wanted to prosecute Foley, they could do it. The best prosecutors in this state are right here in Pensacola.
But let me tell you,
tell you something. Wait a second. I used to be a prosecutor, and you know what? I've seen cases like this where people go to prison for 5 to 15
years.
Mike,
if the guy has his sex with a 16-year-old, you're home free in Washington, D.C. as long as it's voluntary. I wouldn't want it. I think it's bad. It's not a crime.
Would you want your 16-year-old child to have ice cream with this pedophile Republican freak?
You are
of
not.
Course not.
Of course not. But that doesn't make it a crime.
Wait a second, Pat. There are prosecutors out there that know the law. I used to prosecute. I read every word available to me. And you know what? There's probable cause out the gazoo, not just for Mr. Foley, but for the people who covered this up.
Let me tell you something.
This goes all the way to Karl Rove.
What is the crime?
If you think
what is the crime?
It's called solicitation for sex for a minor, Pat. In Florida,
in Washington,
D.C.,
he's 16 years old. He's got age of consent.
It doesn't make any difference.
Clearly, the two of you are going to keep on disagreeing about that, and I understand that. But let me just jump in for a second, because we are finding out today the Justice Department has basically begun its investigation, sending a letter to the House Counsel asking that Mark Foley's office computer and documents in his office be frozen, protected, preserved is the word, for any potential evidence. So clearly there is going to be an investigation underway. But my question, given this latest resignation, how far-reaching is this going to go? For instance, the House Speaker, his name has been going around for the past few days. Should Dennis Hastert resign?
But listen, let me tell you something. Carl, I want to make a prediction here, and I'll come back on the show if I'm wrong. This is going to, if you think for a second that Karl Rove doesn't know what one of his congressmen down in Florida is doing, you're wrong. Karl Rove is a hands-on guy. He knows what's going in every jurisdiction in this county. And if you think for a second that Hastert didn't talk to Karl Rove and doesn't know what's happening here, you're not. Somebody looking at that picture is naive.
Look, we're getting hysterical here. Let me just say this.
No, we're not.
Let me talk a bit, fella. Look, there's no doubt about it. The Republicans are in bad shape. Reynolds is in very bad shape. He's in a tough race. He could go down. I don't think Hastert's going to make it back in January. And there is now, I believe, a possibility Hastert's going to resign. But this is not some monstrous crime. This is a guy hitting on a 16-year-old. He shouldn't have been. It's sleazy, and he's gone.
You know what? We need to take a break here, gentlemen. I appreciate it. MSNBC political analyst Pat Buchanan, also Air America's Mike Papantonio. Thank you so much for your debate.
Thank you.